Thank you very much, Uwe. But I have a correction to make. Bei uns hier gibt einen großen Unterschied zwischen farm and ranch. Don't call somebody from Colorado and New Mexico growing up on a farm. A ranch. Thank you very much for having me. And this is a few thoughts as a result of Uwe's question to me about disruptive technologies. And he mentioned Airbnb and Uber and a number of other companies like this. And I came back and I said, no, it's not disruptive technology. It's a combination. First of all, let's talk about disruption. If there's one thing you learn in Silicon Valley, disruption doesn't necessarily mean innovation. You can be very disruptive and not innovative. So there's more to it than just shaking things up or shaking trees. So by itself, a new technology you learn is not usually disruptive, or rarely is it disruptive. The real disruption comes when you take the technology, perhaps a newly developed technology, and meld it with a new business model. And there really aren't that many new business models. There are new contexts and there are new approaches to business. One of the things that I react to very strongly when people talk about companies like Airbnb, Uber, Lyft, the like, is that there really is a difference today between sustainable business models that are disruptive, innovative, and those that are temporary. And I think that a lot of companies get started that create temporary disruptions, make a temporary blip in the business, but that is just what they are. They're temporary, and very often these are temporary hacks to the legal and regulatory constraints under which they live. I may be called up, and probably Uber will not take my call tonight when I try to get my ride home for saying this, but many of the companies that you know right now as being the Silicon Valley of 2014 with the brand new business model and the brand new technology, wait a little bit. So if you would. Disruption. There really are too many companies that are both startups and enterprises that mistake disruption for innovation. And the sustainable business advantage is really what you're always looking for. Those are the companies that make it through Silicon Valley for the most part. There are exceptions, but this is a better rule. And if I had to say anything, the old sustainable business advantage, something that continues to give back to me as an entrepreneur, and sometimes the first mover advantage are those things that just can't be overlooked. I've been in startups for more years than I care to describe, but let me just say, if I hadn't had sustainable business advantage, if I hadn't taken first mover advantage, none of them would have been successful. So let's talk about what is sustainable. Thank you. If we're talking just about the technology, if I think about it, what are some of the indicators? When I'm doing investing, when I'm doing consulting, when I'm adding sweat equity to early stage companies in order to get them up and running, what do I look for? I look for, obviously, novel functionality, things that you couldn't do before. A big thing that has gone on over the course of the last 30 years since I've been in this business has been mobility. And by that I mean things that are untethered, things that can be moved easily, things that are actually mobile. It's always about metrics. Show me a technology or a business that is faster, cheaper, smaller, and it has to be by one order of magnitude from the competition. If you are small and there are competitors embedded, kind of the legacy, you must be starting out at a point where you're 10 times better along one of these metrics for me to really pay attention to you now. Topologies and distribution. What has gone on, especially with networking and the infrastructure on which we live today, has been all about changes in topologies and changes in the distribution of function, where something gets done, or where something is controlled. Arista is a very good example of companies that are looking at changes in the way one distributes functionality, control, software-defined networking, software-defined everything right now is all about topology and the changes in where processing takes place, where management takes place, and how to do that more effectively. Finally, a big issue is the form of consumption. Are you suddenly allowed to, and is it made available that you can buy something as a product where before it was only a service? Or the reverse. Suddenly I can buy software as a service. I can buy a variety of different things, including management of my technology as a service. The form of consumption and the innovations in those forms of consumption with technologies is a big issue. So I said at the beginning, it's not the technologies that are disruptive, it's the business model. And what are we looking for? We're looking for changes in business innovation, and really what it relies upon is the application of business models, and most business models are old. They've been around for a long time. We're applying them in a new context and with a new technology. But what it is often about is ownership. That is, how do I find something? How do I rent it? How do I buy it? Where do I lease it? How do I consume it? Do I purchase it in bulk, or do I purchase it by the drink? What's the change? What's the innovation? Changing the nature of the business, subsidies. I used to have to pay enormous amounts of money every year to get information services where I could search patents, search various kind of literature. And suddenly, I can go to Google and I get it for free. How does that work? It is a form of subsidy, but really what we're talking about is a change in business model. What is being monetized is not access to the information. What is being monetized is me. I've become the product, not the information that I used to pay for. These are innovations in business models. One of the things that we're also looking for, that I referred to earlier, is looking for basic flaws in business models that exist today. One of the things that we have noted, in particular in the last 15 years, is the use of cooperative, collaborative, the idea of a commons as a way of producing and maintaining and delivering new innovative products and services. Open source software, something that would have been heresy 30, 40 years ago in the days of the first big databases. Now you cannot be a vendor of technology to banks, insurance companies, petrochemical companies, any of them, without a very strong reliance on open source software. It's almost a mandatory checkbox. One of my favorites in this area of a new cooperative and collaborative approach is, for example, internet classified ads. One of my favorite examples of a sustained, innovative business model, and the result is something called Craigslist. If you're not familiar with it, it is a place where individuals can go and put classified advertisement, want ads, on the net, specifically organized according to categories, according to geographies, and it is free to both the person advertising and the person using it. They make money in a small way, by comparison, using approaches that are allowing corporations to make use of the classified advertisements. And what Craigslist has created is truly a disruptive business. It's based on a new collaborative technology called a bulletin board, an electronic bulletin board that's been around for the most part for 40 years. They've taken a technology, a new business model, and they've created a $2 billion business out of what used to be a $24 billion business. That is a disruption. They have done something that's sustainable, and you see over a 10, 12-year period, they have found a flaw in the existing business model, and they went right at it. And the result, they make a nice business out of it, but it has actually made a real mess of the classified advertisement business as a result. I want you also to consider companies like Apple with what they have done with iTunes and how it has changed music. What Netflix has done, and others like Netflix, has changed the distribution of media and movies and television. These are disruptive business models in association with new technologies. That's what's disruptive. So I've made the comments that you have to beware of these new business models. Too often, what they are what I call hacks. They are short-lived, taking advantage of inconsistencies, discontinuities in the legal and regulatory frameworks. Short-term rentals and leasing models that masquerade as sharing economic models. The sharing economy, we hear a lot about it, and it's Uber and it's Airbnb. Airbnb is generating a lot of heat from companies, from cities, from municipalities who are no longer getting tax revenue from their hotels. They are bypassing the regulations and the compliance that has been put in place to make sure that a guest who stays at a place of a hospitality business has certain safety requirements, has certain levels of sanitation and so forth. This is a hack. How long-term it is, I can't tell you. Whether, in fact, they will morph into different businesses, again, I can't tell you. But many of the companies who have tried to emulate this model have already failed. A lot more of them will fail. There are a few who have been wildly successful, and those have been the first ones. But they've used technology to uncover and capitalize on legal loopholes and regulatory discontinuities. Those loopholes can be fixed and filled. Those discontinuities can be fixed and filled, assuming you have a Congress or a government that actually knows how to create laws. And in the U.S., that's of some question sometimes. But these are the kinds of businesses that are likely to generate a variety of very serious and also very effective responses. And you know about it in Germany from Uber and the reaction that's happened there. It's happened in France. It's happening in the U.S. with these very same companies. Not all of the innovation and business model are long-lived. Have to be careful. This is one of the things that I have to pay attention to as an investor, as a consultant, and as a creator of companies. And I've been doing this for a long time. Thank you. So I started out with these same points. I'll end with these same points. By the way, if you want copies of this, give me a card or send me an email. I'm happy to send this to you. And I'm also happy to talk about it. You asked that I mentioned ARPA. Is that correct?
Mentioned what?
ARPA? The ARPANET?
Yeah, the ARPANET.
Yes, well, like Andy, I came here in early 70s, and while I was taking a break in my doctoral program, I had come to know a man named Paul Barron, who was arguably one of the fathers of the internet, and absolutely, without question, the man who really put together the idea of packet switching in the 60s. And he said, there's this new thing from the Advanced Research Projects Agency, ARPA, part of the US government, Department of Defense, but it's not military, it's not, there's no secrecy. It is to be a research network, and we want to provide a means of getting access to a lot of different research at various different research organizations, universities, government, so forth. And one of the things we need is a mechanism by which groups of researchers and scientists can collaborate. You, Rich, have spent the last few years as a programmer at IBM, but you're studying human-computer interaction and interfaces. What can we do? What can we build? As a result, he gave me the opportunity to be one of the, I would say, 20, 25 guys who ended up putting the first distributed email systems together on the ARPANET when there were 5 sites on the ARPANET. And the ARPANET has since grown a bit into what became the internet. And so I guess I get to take responsibility as one of the fathers of email. So every time you get spam in your inbox, you can blame it on me, and you can blame it on Paul Barron, who hired me as part of the ARPANET. Thank you.